I guess this question's mostly for Jordan Peterson. Just to hopefully enlighten a bit more what you mean by God, do you think that if all humanity were to cease to exist, does God still exist?
I don't think I know how to answer that. It's just, the situation is too hypothetical. I mean, I can take a crack at some of it, but so human beings are characterized by consciousness and by self-consciousness, and the latter in particular seems to be something relatively unique. There's some vague evidence for self-consciousness of lower sorts in animals, but it's not very compelling. Some of them can recognize themselves in a mirror, but our self-consciousness is accompanied by elaborated imagistic and linguistic models of ourselves and that have been elaborated over large spans of time. There are lots of elements of being that would disappear if we disappeared. Now, and it isn't even obvious to what extent that's true, right? Because I don't really understand to what degree being itself is dependent on consciousness. Like the classic materialist Enlightenment view, which I would say is basically a 19th century view, something like that, is that if all consciousness was extinguished, the material substrate of the universe would continue unchanged. But I don't really buy that as an argument, because I think that the material substrate, I think that reality is an interaction between what we perceive of as the material substrate and consciousness itself. And so then when you destroy consciousness, you destroy reality. And what that leaves, I don't really understand, because it doesn't have any temporality in any obvious sense. It doesn't have any size in any obvious sense without the introduction of an invisible observer. So lots vanishes without human consciousness and self-consciousness. I don't know how to answer the question, does God vanish? Because that brings us back into the same problem that I was talking about earlier, is that it's not exactly easy to understand what people are talking about when they say God. You know, because when you ask the question, would God disappear? There's an assumption there that whatever God is understandable and boxable, like a simple concept, like a chair, and that we both share the same conception. And, you know, there's endless warnings in deep religious literature against assuming that you understand what that term means, or sometimes even for using the term. So that's the best I'm going to be able to do with that question.
Thank you.
Hey there. So my question is about something that Matt said, but I'd actually like to get Dr. Peterson to address it first, if that's okay. So Matt, you said that some people are not willing to put in the work of developing sort of their own moral system, and they like turn to religion to free them from the burden of that thought. But doesn't it make sense on some level to view religion as like an archival system that holds truth? Like if we abandon that, are we not then just in a place where everyone is forced to invent their own morality for themselves throughout their life, and then like a baby born has to try to achieve that again? Like that
No.
seems like, from an operative level, just an impossible system to set up that would ever get you anywhere. So I'm just wondering how you would resolve that conflict.
That was Nietzsche's critique, essentially.
Well, I'm not trying to set up the system. I think the system's already set up. So my goal is not to rid the world of religion. That's just a fortunate side effect from my goals. My goal is to have the best understanding of reality that I can, and for other people to do so as well. Now, when I talk about religion, there are things within religious histories, within religious teachings that are passed down, which are true and good and useful. And there's no reason to think that any of those things would go away if we stopped believing in a God, because they are true and good and useful whether there is a God or not. If the thing that we're worried about is, and I've asked people before, and I apologize if anybody's bothered by this, but there are people who are like, oh, if you don't believe in a God, what keeps you from running around raping and killing people? And I was like, so if you became convinced today that your belief in God was unfounded and you were forced by reason to give it up, would you run around and start doing that? And there are people who will say yes, and I hopefully, optimistically don't believe them, but we know that there are people who do that. But the truth about what is good and useful is true whether a particular religion survives or not. And we don't lose that because children aren't born with an understanding of morality. They learn that. They are educated by their parents. They are taught. They explore the world. Everybody does, in fact, go through the effort of creating and understanding their own morality. It's just that we adopt things from figures around us who show evidence that they are smarter and understand this better as a shorthand. We ride on the shoulders of giants. The curious question is, and I ask this for people ostensibly who are Christian, who believe in both a God and a devil, is how did you decide that God was the good one and the devil was the evil one? Because the model is that, well, God wrote his moral code on your heart, and that's how you tell. But if that's the case, then whether or not, if the devil had written his moral code on your heart, you would be saying he was the good one. The truth is, you are using your internal, personal, subjective assessments to determine that God is the good one, or this religion is the right one, or the First Baptist Church got it right, or the Second Baptist Church got it right, or this is the preacher we should hire. This is what we do. And I don't see much value in worrying about, is it all going to go away, when it's clear it doesn't, because secular individuals are no more immoral or criminal-minded than anybody else. In fact, there may be some cases to show that we're less.
But in this society, they are no more criminally minded. Like, we have a religious foundation, right? Like, I wouldn't go around like raping and pillaging if I abandoned God, but there were societies that did when they didn't have that structure. So how do you resolve that?
I'm not saying that religious authorities haven't been useful. It's just that what I hear from some people is that we should keep this because of that particular usefulness, because they fear what will happen otherwise, because what they've seen in the past. And I don't buy that, because that boils down to saying, I may not need religion, but you people do. And that is far too arrogant for me to ever adopt as a position.